In my previous video about EA Sports College Football 25, I mentioned that there are 4 basic challenges that I'm having with the game, which have caused me to lose the vast majority of the matches that I've played against the CPU so far, all of which have been on the All-American difficulty without any adjustments to the gameplay or AI sliders. One of those problems is my fault, and I own up to it, which is that I need to get better at reading the defenses and not turning the ball over as much. The second issue is that the CPU-controlled defenders do not properly play outside containment and take horrible pursuit angles that give up big plays and scores. That one's not on me, since I cannot personally control all 11 players on the defense, and I am dependent on the CPU-controlled players doing their assigned jobs. The third problem that I've been having is the same problem that everyone else is having with the game, and it was the primary topic of the previous video, which is that the kicking meter is just too damn hard. The fourth major issue that I'm having with College Football 25 is the changes to the option mechanics and controls. Option controls have been changed such that the user now has to hold the X button on a PlayStation controller in order for the QB to keep the ball, or you can release the button in order to hand off to the fullback or halfback. Unlike with the kicking meter, the option controls at least have a tutorial prompt that appears, which stops the game and which the user has to explicitly dismiss. This, of course, is in stark contrast to the kick meter tutorial, which is an easily missable tooltip that's in a tiny font in the corner of the screen. Once again, there is no skill trainer or tutorials to teach these revised mechanics, let alone to teach the user how to actually read the defense, which defender to read, or when it's appropriate to hand the ball off, keep the ball, or pitch the ball. The lack of a skill trainer is, in my opinion, one of the biggest flaws in College Football 25. The skill trainer is one of the single best features to ever be added to any sports game ever. Not only does it tutorialize gameplay mechanics, but it also teaches fundamental football concepts. It, or something like it, should be a standard feature in every single sports game that gets released. Period. No, the shitty mini-camp drills do not fill the same role. They are arcade mini-games, they are not gameplay tutorials, and they most definitely are not real-life football teaching tools. And given how different college football is compared to NFL football, and also given how many gameplay mechanics have been changed for College Football 25 compared to previous Madden releases, the need for a robust skill trainer and tutorials is even more important, and I am completely blindsided by the fact that it is not in this game. I completely 100% expected to see a slew of new skill trainer tutorials for college football concepts, ranging from how to manage the collegiate game clock, to how to run a no-huddle offense, to how to play college overtime rules, to executing the triple option, and to running defensive schemes like the 5-2, the 4-2-5, or the 3-3-5. I also expected to see skill trainer tutorials for the new and modified College Football 25 mechanics, such as the new kick meter, the new option controls, and the new do-it-yourself reverse plays. None of that is in the game, so gamers are forced to have to botch these mechanics in games, or spend a lot of time in open practice figuring these things out for themselves in advance, and hoping that they are understanding it all correctly because they are given no guidance on it whatsoever. And since the skill trainer has been in Madden for years, this would have been a mostly copy and paste job for EA and Tiburon, and EA and Tiburon had 3 years to copy and paste it and update it for the college game. There is no excuse for this to not be in the game. Though the lack of a skill trainer in College Football 25 does have me worried that this brilliant feature might also be removed from the upcoming Madden 25 as well, which would be a damn shame. Furthermore, there is no explanation of the option controls in the control summary in the pause menu or the game settings. I also only ever saw one tooltip pop up that told me that I need to hold the button to keep the ball, even though I went into the settings and set the tooltips to always on. They are still not showing up at all, ever. So either Tiburon didn't put any tooltips in the game, or this always on setting is bugged and Tiburon needs to fix it. In any case, option controls have been changed in College Football 25 such that the user now needs to hold the X button in order for the QB to keep the ball on option plays. The timing window for the inputs also does not seem to be linked to the actual animation between the QB and the running back, which makes it very unclear to the user when exactly the game expects these inputs to be made. And, I'll admit, I can certainly see the logic behind the decision to hold the button for the keeper. It's basically hold the button to hold the ball, or release the button to hand off the ball. That seems like it would make intuitive sense, but in actual practice, it does not work so great. The problem is that this new control flies in the face of all the other established control precedents in the rest of the game, and is also in direct conflict with over a decade of muscle memory from Madden's controls, and the controls of old NCAA football games. There is no other situation in this game in which the user is expected to hold a button in order to hold onto the football. We don't have to hold the button in order to not lateral or fumble the ball when we're running. QBs don't have to hold the button in order to not throw a pass on passing plays. Kickers don't hold a button in order to not kick the ball. Receivers don't have to hold a button in order to catch passes and complete the process and, not pull a Calvin Johnson. And defenders do not need to hold a button to not drop interceptions or fumble recoveries. In fact, the only other time you ever hold a button in this game is to charge the kick meter or to charge the pass meter. In both of those cases, you hold the button in order to get rid of the ball, not to keep it. So I really am not comfortable with this hold the button to keep the ball mechanic. If this were a VR game with motion controls, then yeah, this would probably be a good and intuitive mechanic. But in a traditional football game played with a standard gamepad, it just feels wrong in comparison to all of the game's other controls and all of the control precedents that have been set by every other football game ever. Worse yet, having to hold down a button also makes it very unclear how the timing is supposed to work. Am I supposed to hold the X button when snapping the ball and then continue to hold it all the way through to the point that I decide to hand off or keep it? Or do I press X to snap the ball, then release the button, and then press and hold it again in order to keep the ball? And how does this work on RPOs? Am I supposed to snap the ball, then hold X to not hand off, and then release X and press the receiver button to throw? Or am I supposed to continue holding X while also pressing the button of the receiver I want to throw to? In which case, I've probably got to do some serious finger gymnastics to press all of those buttons. After spending an hour or so in open practice, it seems like EA and Tiburon couldn't figure out how the timing rules are supposed to work either, because the rules seem to be different for any given option play or option play type. That's not necessarily the problem though, because different plays can and probably should have different timings. The problem is that these timing rules, whatever the rules are, do not seem to line up with the actual animations for the read option handoffs. So it is unclear on any given play exactly when the user is supposed to release the button if you want to hand it off. In real football, the QB is supposed to make this decision based on what the conflict defender is doing at the point when he and the running back are at the so-called mesh point, which is the point in the play where the QB is holding the ball out towards the running back and must decide whether to hand the ball off or to keep it.
How do we make the correct read and know when to hand the ball off and when to keep it? Well, once the quarterback meshes with the running back on the handoff, he gets his eyes immediately to the read man. If the read man sits or widens...
But in the video game, the QB must make this handoff decision well before the players are at the mesh point. In fact, on some plays, the QB has to make this decision as soon as the ball is snapped. Some plays are ridiculously strict, while others are overly generous. For triple options, especially out of the Service Academy Flexbone sets, the timing for the fullback handoff is very strict, which barely gives any time for the user to read the conflict defender at all. Now, to be fair to the game, the real-life timing for this play is also very narrow, so I'm actually kind of okay with the user having to make a quick judgment call on this particular play, since that is actually fairly accurate to the real-life Service Academy triple option. However, The inverted veer has an even stricter timing window, in that it doesn't have a timing window at all. When running the inverted veer in practice mode, I found that I had to release the X button as soon as the ball is snapped in order to be able to hand off the ball. This means that I had to commit to handing off the ball before the conflict defender has even moved, let alone before I've had a chance to process it, which completely defeats the purpose of the read option to begin with. Notice in these clips how holding the button for any length of time after the snap results in the QB keeping the ball. He only hands it off if I release the button immediately, basically tap the button in order to snap the ball. The correct timing for this play should be that I should have until the halfback moves away from the QB for me to decide whether to hand off the ball. This point right here is when I should need to release the button in order to hand off the ball, while the QB is holding the ball out to the running back's gut. But that's not the case. You have to release the button well before this happens in order to actually give the ball to the running back. But that isn't the way that this play is supposed to work. The user has to commit to the handoff immediately without having a chance to actually read the conflict defender. The user basically has to just guess whether to hand off the ball or not, and they have to do that before snapping the ball, which is not how this play is designed to work in real football, and it's not the way that it should work in the video game. This needs to be fixed. On the other end of the spectrum, the timing for RPOs seems incredibly loose, like to the point of being a liability. It's so loose that if I release the X button early because I want to throw, the QB might still hand off the ball anyway, and then the runner immediately dives or hurdles when I press the square or triangle button to try to throw the ball to the receiver because I think the QB still has the ball and is able to throw. Like, it happens so prematurely that the game will even start to slow down because of the pass aiming mechanic, because the game still even thinks that I'm allowed to pass the ball, even though it has already handed it off to the running back. It's all very confusing and counterintuitive. It's an example of change for change's sake, of fixing something that ain't broke. The existing option controls from Madden have worked fine for years. There was no reason to change them. And, as mentioned before, there's no tutorial for any of this and no option to change the control mode back to how Madden has always done it, nor is there any setting to loosen the timing windows so that I actually have time to read the conflict defender. So, I'm not a game designer, but if I were programming this game, the way that I think I would like to make the read option work is for the button commands to be tied to specific keyframes of the set of handoff animations for read options. So for any read option handoff animation, there should be a start keyframe for when the QB starts to hold out the ball towards the running back, and there should be an end keyframe for when the QB starts to pull the ball back to himself. If the game requires that the user hold the button, then it should simply check if the user is holding the X button at the starting keyframe. If not, then you branch into the handoff animation and the quarterback hands off the ball to the running back. If the user is still holding X at that starting keyframe, but then releases X any time before the end keyframe, then you would also hand off the ball. Alternatively, if the player is allowed to revert to the old Madden-style controls, then it's even simpler. You just have to check if the X button is being pressed or held at all at any point between those two keyframes in order to trigger the handoff. By tagging all read option handoff animations as a, quote, read option handoff, unquote, and then applying this logic to all animations with that read option handoff tag, you would have a universal solution that does not require manually setting the timing window for each individual play, and which ties the timing of the user input into the actual animation to which that input is relevant. If EA wants, they could then add difficulty adjustments that widen the window in which the user can hand off the ball or shorten it. Allowing the button to be pressed later than that final keyframe could cause problems with animations, so most, if not all, of any additional buffer period based on the difficulty level would have to go before the handoff animation. But hell, I'm even okay with making the read option handoff harder by adding an option for mistimed button presses to result in a fumble, just like a mistimed option pitch can be fumbled. Again, my problem, just to be clear, is not that running the option is too hard. My complaint is that the timing windows are not clear to the user because they don't line up with the actual animations. As long as the timing of the button presses is actually tied to the animation so that it is clear to the user when the button input needs to be made, I'm perfectly okay with the read option having a narrow time window and being harder to execute. This may seem like a minor problem, and aside from the inverted veer giving literally no time to read the conflict defender at all, I will admit that it is a much more minor problem than the kicking meter in the grand scheme of things, which is why I decided to make that video first. If you're not comfortable with the option controls, then you can simply not run an option-based offense and you can avoid calling option plays like it's the plague. It's a lot harder to avoid kicking, however. You can choose to be more aggressive on fourth down and with 2-point conversion attempts so that you can avoid kicking whenever possible, but there are still going to be situations in which you really should be punting or kicking a field goal, and also you're going to have to kick at least one kickoff in every match. So if the kicking meter is a deal breaker, then that's a much more significant deal breaker because it will affect every single match you play. Problems with the option controls will not, however, affect every match that you play. That is, unless you are like me, and you build your entire offensive game plan around the option scheme. I run a heavy option-based offense, especially in college football. In Madden, it will depend a lot more on which team I have and who the QB is. With Justin Fields as the starting QB for the Bears in the past few years, I ran a lot of option and triple option in Madden. I will probably still run the option with Caleb Williams, but probably not as much as I did with Fields. And if I were to have someone like Matt Stafford or Derek Carr behind center, then I'm probably not running any option at all ever. And sure, whether or not I decide to run the option in College Football 25 will also depend on my roster. If the best I can do in Dynasty, for example, is to recruit a pure pocket passer, then I probably won't be running much option. But even in that case, considering the larger college roster size, I would probably still try to make an effort to recruit an athletic QB to rotate in for option plays, so the option is still going to be a part of my playbook and scheme no matter what. The option is a staple of my offensive playstyle, and not being able to easily understand how to control and execute any given option play in College Football 25 comes close to being a deal breaker for the entire game for me. Your results may vary. Just like with the kicking meter, I'm going to keep giving it the old college try. Hopefully it will start to click with me and I can continue to call option plays and enjoy the game. But Tiburon definitely needs to fix that inverted veer because that play is unusable as it currently stands. And I still think that they should definitely add an option to revert to the old style of option controls in which the player presses or holds the X button after the snap in order to hand the ball off. I would also like to see options to tighten or loosen the timing windows for option handoffs, and maybe even add an AI slider specifically dedicated to how aggressively defenses will attack option QBs. As I've mentioned before, defensive containment and pursuit angles are also a big problem with this game. I frequently see multiple defenders go after the QB and leave the pitchman completely uncovered, instead of each defender sticking with his assigned role. This problem has the potential to make executing the option become too easy for users, while the user can simply manually control the force players in order to contain the CPU option pitch. So this needs to be fixed by Tiburon so that it doesn't negatively affect the balance and challenge of the game. I will be posting a full review of College Football 25 to my blog in the coming week or so. So if you enjoyed this video or the previous video, then please check that out. And also remember that my content is entirely supported by the generosity of viewers like you through Patreon. My channel is not monetized because I don't want your viewing experience to be interrupted by ads any more than it absolutely has to, since YouTube puts ads in non-monetized videos without the creator's knowledge or consent. Sorry, there's nothing I can do about that. But I'm not seeing any revenue from any such ads, so if you do want to send $1 or $2 my way through Patreon, I would definitely appreciate it, and it would really help to offset the costs of software licenses for the editing tools that I use to make content like this, and for the hosting and maintenance costs of my blog. I want to take this moment to thank all of my patrons, past, present, and future, since your support helps make this possible and worthwhile. I may also make additional video content for College Football 25 in the future, hopefully with nice things to say about it. I just wanted to get these complaints off my chest ASAP so that they can hopefully be fixed and I can start enjoying the game more. In the meantime, enjoy College Football 25. It's good to finally have college football video gaming back. Good luck to you in your games, and thanks for watching.